Welcome to Will This Never End? The title is a quote, and I will tell the story about that in a little while. But first, let's get through the legal stuff. This is an important note from our legal team. Perhaps I should introduce myself. G'day, I'm Marco. I'm an immigrant who has lived in 3 countries and managed teams in 13. I enjoy technology a little too much. Mainly, I like helping others use technology and sharing my experiences and knowledge. And sometimes you'll find me growing vegetables out on my city terrace. The agenda today is sort of a little bit tongue-in-cheek. The title slide of Will This Never End? You want me to do what? Will this thing work? And oops. And these will make sense as we go through it. You've seen probably a lot of variants on the CD, the continuous delivery pipeline today. This is the one I plan to use. I try to keep it simple: dev, QA, staging, production. Yours may be different. You might have more or less, but the key concepts remain the same. When delivering code, organizations need to verify performance, both technical and business performance, and quality at every stage in the life cycle, both before it reaches customers and in production. You want to automate from the developer triggering the pipeline to the customer experiencing the code. Continuous delivering, verifying, deploying, and sometimes rolling back if need be. It looks like there's some blanks on this diagram, and there is. So let me share some of my lessons in continuous delivery that I've learned, and we'll use this as our roadmap. We'll fill in this diagram as we go along the way. So let's go back to our title. In a prior life, one of my devs walked in, leaned on my door frame and asked, "Will this never end?" To protect them, let's give them the non-gender name of Cameron. Cameron was new to the company and tasked to get an existing app into our CD pipeline. Cameron had Lucidchart application architecture diagrams plastered all over their cubicle with hand-scribbled notes on them. Because each time they pulled on a thread of code, they would find a new dependency, a new database or a new API or a HTTP call. So this is one of the challenges of moving to CD, discovering the connections. So I walked Cameron down to the operations floor and got the ops manager to pull up the APM, the application performance monitor, for this application. And there on the screen were all the details that they needed. Cameron gave me a very dirty look. And it was a fair cop. It was my mistake. I should not have assumed that Cameron would know to start with APM auto discovery for their CD project. So take a moment now and just consider how complex your applications are. You see, if your application flow map looks like this, you can manually work out what's going on, sure. Gather the dependencies to start your CD pipeline. But with a more complex app, you can start putting things together like this. Now, this is a nicely organized architecture placemat, right? Everything you need for a CD pipeline. You've got little symbols for the databases and so on. So this is how the application works, right? Well, unfortunately, when we ran auto discovery, it revealed that the actual application's connected like this. This is the reality we live in. These are real applications. There's 7 tiers with 18 nodes, 14 tiers with 38 nodes, real performance measures. And of course, you can drill down into each of these in an APM solution to see what the underlying transactions are, because an application is really just a collection of transactions. And you can drill down into to catch every dependency, every prerequisite. If something new is added, you're going to need to know that. You can't rely on architecture diagrams. You need a live auto discovery. If a new API or database gets added, it will appear on this display. Every metric here is automatically, dynamically baselined. So you're getting a very clear before picture of what the application is doing before that continuously delivered release pops out. Don't attempt to do this manually. This is lesson 1. So this was my advice for Cameron of your need for tools, in this case, application performance management or APM, begins before you even start creating and setting up your continuous delivery pipeline. So let's add this into our diagram. So the basic need for an APM central nervous system, or CNS, that will connect everything together. I call it a central nervous system because it will act a bit like the human central nervous system. Our CNS allows us to see an open flame and realize it's a danger and pull our hand away before we get burnt. It combines all the information from different locations, our eyes, our fingers, and derives insights to make key decisions, and then sends out the command to take action. That APM, central nervous system, that you get, it's got to have auto-discovery and it's got to have dynamic baselining. So that will give you a clear visibility of what you must continuously deliver. With visibility, Cameron could start on building the delivery and rollback mechanisms. So we showed him the scripts for Build It Today. And he was, "You want me to do what?" was his response. It was Cameron's response. Remember, the reason to go down the continuous delivery path is to move all of the non-customer experienced work off your plate. You want to move from idea to customer feedback as fast as possible. You want to be able to experiment. And depending on the nature of your apps, you're going to have different ways of experimenting. So hopefully we're all pretty familiar with the common deployment choices: the rolling upgrade, swap a server in, swap a server out, a blue-green deployment, complete version 1, complete version 2, make your choice, and canary deployment, which is of course a variation of blue-green, a little bit of version 2 while you're working out if it actually flies or not. But in each of these, there are two common aspects of all of these approaches. The first aspect is somewhere along the way, and often multiple times along the way, you have to make a decision. Is this working or not? Do I keep going or do I roll back? And then the second common aspect is that once you know there is a negative impact, you want to roll back as fast as humanly possible. In fact, faster than humanly possible. You want to roll back as soon as possible once you've realized there's a negative impact. So let's talk about how you do that. So this is how it would look in practice. So we've got visibility, lesson 1 gave us the APM already in place, constantly monitoring your application to identify issues so that, if you deploy into production, it will see in production, or even before then, in this sort of scenario, as you're deploying the service, in each phase of the process, it can verify the service, in this case with AppDynamics as the APM. And not just because it's AppDynamics, it's not just from the infrastructure point of view, it's also from the business point of view. So what you're looking at here, you see that we're pulling the checkout information out, the value of the checkout, and identifying, hey, in the new release, the revenue value is only $3,200 a minute versus in the old release, it was $1,400 a minute. Sorry, $14,000 a minute. And so the risk is very high with this release, and it should automatically roll back. So what if the change isn't detectable until you deploy? Well, then APM can also give you insight into how the new version is working from a customer journey point of view, making sure that your APM can correlate application and infrastructure metrics and the business metrics. You see, commit and roll back is a significant business decision. You need all the right information right at your fingertips. And this before and after dashboard is a very clear winner for that sort of thing, so that you can make the decision as a data-driven decision. And also, by the way, not related to CD, but this sort of dashboard is great for justifying your team's existence and the value that you bring to the company. You can prove that the things that you said, we want to improve our customer experience, it will make things better, and you can prove that it actually did make things better with before and after pictures like this. But in this conversation, we're just talking about, it will help you make those commit, go forward, or roll back decisions. And then the next key is the action you take and how quickly you can take it. So imagine you push the button and you deliver that new release, and you start seeing wild variations in transaction response time. Well, if your APM tool and CD tool are integrated, you can set up this type of decision as an automated decision in advance and use a data-driven approach. Simply decide the acceptable threshold, and if the new release doesn't meet it, automatically roll back. So for our action, in this example, AppDynamics integrates with Harness to roll that version of software back to the previous healthy version. And that brings me to lesson 2 here. Automate your pipeline. Remember, you're trying to shorten the feedback loop on new features and functions. The shortest loop is when the decisions are defined in advance and the actions are automated. You want to reach the point where you can submit and log off. Because should there be an issue, it will automatically roll back to the prior successful version. And the bonus to this comes when you get so good at this that you feel comfortable to experiment. I gave a talk a few weeks ago called Slowdown is the New Outage. I'll put a link to it in the chat. And you should be able to add and subtract performance to your environment, to your infrastructure, and see what impact that has on revenue or SLAs or SLOs. Amazon Retail calculated that with just a 100 millisecond delay in transaction time, it cost them 1% of successful sales in that transaction type. Now, what would the ratio of performance to revenue be in your enterprise? You might not be able to answer that right now. But anyway, lesson 2 is about that. It's about automating delivery so that you can take on questions like that and experiment a little bit safely in knowing that you're okay. So let's add this into our diagram, right? Now we're adding in continuous delivery and rollback as a service. So we started with that APM central nervous system, giving us correlated performances with business impact. Now we add in the continuous delivery and rollback platform, and eliminating all of those manual scripts and with an automated platform that's integrated again to the APM so that canary tests and things like that can be automatically configured to execute. Now, a little digression here. As you automate delivery, you will be tempted to deploy all the time. Get my magnificent code in front of the customer immediately. Not so fast. As a software vendor, AppDynamics faced interesting pushback when we moved to continuous delivery. Our engineering team was pushing out versions on our SaaS environments with happy abandon. Customers asked us to stop giving them releases so often because they couldn't keep up and they wanted something more orderly. And this is where there is more than code to consider when you deploy. So let me add a quick extra lesson in here. Lesson 3, even Doggo knows this, that deploying timing should never be just because you can. If your CI processes get dialed in and your main branch is kept as bug-free and deployable as possible, you can really up the frequency of your deployments over time. But the goal is to achieve a balance and achieve an interval that meets both the business and the engineering needs. Sometimes the timing is just because you can't ask your team to give up all of their Saturday nights, so you've got to deploy in the middle of a week, in the middle of the day. And other times it's going to be that the business wants to test out something, perhaps a new pricing idea or a new marketing message that's not related to features at all. And by the way, at AppD, we now limit ourselves to no more than a monthly release for our SaaS customers. Of course, if you're an on-premise customer, well, you're going to have to install it, so you're choosing when you want to release based on your need for the features. So this is how we at AppDynamics do the balance anyway. So let's update our diagram. So I added in these vertical words of trigger in red here to sort of reflect that decision that you need to balance when you go from into production. You need to balance when you're driving things through the testing phase. So at each stage we want to verify. Now, if we look here, we see verifies on the screen. We want to verify that the application is ready to move to the next stage. And for this, well, we have to talk about our feelings. Release anxiety is a real thing. In a recent presentation, I polled the audience about this. A clear majority acknowledged that they were anxious with each new release, 61%. Now, continuous delivery makes things fast and easy, but we also must be safe and confident. That feeling comes from testing. From automated transaction and load testing, you can feel safe, no more release anxiety. Now, verification is a whole process on its own, and it might look something like this. You create some scripts to test specific transaction function. You choose metrics to be analyzed against dynamic baselines to ensure performance. One gotcha, make sure that you save all of your APM metric selections with the test as part of the test configuration. Because otherwise you're going to have, a QA will present you with this test failed, and you'll go, well, what are these metrics that it failed against? And they'll go, well, they're somewhere in APM. But with a good test system, you can save your APM metrics inside the test configuration and have them correlate. Also, avoid aggregation in your APM system for the specific test transactions. Metrics used in a test should be saved with a full resolution in a transaction snapshot so that you can see the actual things the actual numbers of what happened when that actual test was being run. So the key here is to integrate test automation with the APM central nervous system. And here's what I mean by that. From inside your test automation tool, in this case Apica, you'll want to connect directly to your APM tool, in this case App Dynamics. So you see right on the screen there is a tab inside the Apica window for App Dynamics. So within your testing tool, you click on App Dynamics. Now you're seeing business transactions, the tests that are being run, but from a business transaction point of view, as App Dynamics would see it, as your APM would see it. And you're getting that sort of level, that snapshot level detail, basic detail, there inside Apica. The time it took and the little yellow triangle saying, hey, there was a problem with the user experience. But the cool thing about the integration is that you can then click on drill down in App Dynamics. And that will take you to the specific, you don't have to click around, it will take you to the specific flow map for the failing transaction. Now down on the left here, you can see already that App Dynamics has identified some probable root causes. But on this particular case, there's also a drill down around the server. So if we click on that, it will take us straight to the call graph. Now the call graph has a column on the right side here that easily shows where the time is going for this transaction. So it's pretty simple to spot the method or HTTP call that is the problem. You can see the line of code and the number right there. Right? It's a little small in the font, but line 790 is the problem. I will come back to knowing about that line of code number at the end of the session. So just remember that we were able to drill down and see that line number. So think about what we've done here. Within about 4 clicks, we went from a failed test to a line of code. And that gives us lesson 4. Your APM and your test has to be integrated as well. And that's going to deliver you, release relaxation. So recall the APM and deploy and rollback tool integration means that a test failing will automatically roll back anyway. So you're not worried about sort of known failures sneaking into the next phase of production. And now the APM and test tool integration means that, when it does get rolled back, when you next log in, because no one's walking into the office anymore, so you're just logging in, you can go straight from the failed test to the line of code, to the transaction snapshot for the specific transaction. No aggregation, straight to the details you need. And then you can resubmit and off you go and you're back seeing running code again. So no more release anxiety, just hit submit and log out. So time to update our diagram. We already have the APM central nervous system at the bottom here, bringing and tying everything together, measuring before and after, correlating business and technology performance. You've got the integrated CD platform at the top, giving us one-click production and deployment and automated rollbacks when needed. And now we add in continuous testing to allow transaction verification and load testing before production, and also synthetic testing once in production to keep ensuring that you're meeting your SLAs or SLOs or whatever your measures are. All integrated into APM so that you can go from a failed test in any phase here, dev, QA, wherever, straight to a line of code, a system call, a database call. But there's still one more space in our diagram here, because even when you have that preset decision thresholds for performance and your order builds and delivers and rollbacks and so on, sometimes you're still going to have this. Oops. Something can still be overlooked. Some things are so complex that it only occurs when real humans interact with your code or real data. The result is you're wasting precious resources, time and productivity on debugging these things. Research says that it's about 12 hours in the average week for an engineer. Now, I'm not going to spend time on sort of stepping through each part of this process, because this is our working life, right? A typical debugging process looks a bit like this. Not only is the process time intensive, but there's a likely challenge at each step, something that could go wrong. And you're going to insert code in and submit the code, and it's going to write some stuff out to logs, and then you're going to sit and review logs until your eyes bleed, and even then you might not get the answer, and you might be back at square one again and having to put in some more code and write more things to logs and looking until your eye bleeds. You want to set breakpoints in your code. Even in a QA environment, people are going to say no, because that's going to grind the entire environment to a halt. And that's when I learned about non-breaking breakpoints. Now, I've spelled this out on the slide for a little bit of clarity here, but essentially, This takes the steps that you would take with a breakpoint without stopping the code. It puts the variable values and the debug data aside for you so that you can watch things happening even in a production environment without grinding things to a halt. You can insert these dynamic watch points, the non-breaking breakpoints, but they won't break the thread of execution, and there's performance headache, they won't introduce performance overhead to impact the application. So how does this look? Well, Deep Code Insights gives a read-only access to production code and data. Remember back in the call graph that we'd identified the specific line of code, 790 I think it was? So remember that. As you can see here on the screen, DCI loads in your code from Git or wherever you keep it in the left-hand side of the screen, in the source view, in the left pane. And that tree gets loaded. In the middle pane, we jump to the specific line of code. And if you see here, we've selected a line, and then that little green circle appears on the left to create one of these non-breaking breakpoints. And then in the right pane, you select the bits of data that you want to track, the variable values, whatever it is you want it to tell you to. And then you step back and wait. And when the code executes, it will create a little timestamp and give you entries down on the bottom of the screen, in the bottom pane. The data will load down there, and you can see exactly what your code is doing live. Now, you can do this in production because you can be protected from GDPR, it's read-only. You can be protected from GDPR problems and PI data and PCI data and so on, because it will filter those so that it will not reveal data to you that you shouldn't see. But, a numeric variable, something like that, the final cost of the card, you don't want to see the credit card information, you just want to see what the final cost of the card is. You can see those sorts of metrics in here. And by the way, they added a nice feature. Because one of the famous things is that you set a trace going, and then you see what you learn from wherever what you need to know, and you come over here and you start coding to fix it and things like that, and you then find out that you forgot to switch the tracing and so on off, and then you get a call from operations a few weeks later of you filled up the storage volume with this log file. What the hell is this thing? So this is a real world tool. They added in their timers so that if you leave it turned on, it will shut itself off, and you have to kind of switch it back on again if you haven't found your answer so far. So even if you get distracted, it won't bog down your system. You won't get those nasty phone calls from the storage person. Whether it's something that works on your machine but not in QA, whether it's something that's difficult to reproduce, diagnosing bugs in production even, you don't have to drown in logs till your eyes bleed. And this is lesson 5, that sometimes it can only be diagnosed live. So give yourself the right tool set to do that. Deep Code Insights means that you can dive straight into a running environment and watch what happens live. So time to update our diagram again, right? So APM, central nervous system at the bottom, continuous delivery, deploying and rolling back with a single click at the top, continuous testing, verifying at each stage along the way, synthetic testing coming with that, carries that verification on into production. Your preset decisions and thresholds that you've set will decide whether, in the flow charts within your CD product will decide whether things get automatically rolled back or not. And for those ones that can only be found live, Deep Code Insights now connects in to minimize MTTR, right? Mean time to recovery, and to minimize that debug time and protect you from those log-driven eye-bleeding sessions. But one thing here, the key of all this is the integration. So let's move from generic products here to specific products. You can get all of these products, Harness, Apica, and of course AppDynamics, from AppDynamics. We're part of Cisco. And buying them all from one vendor in that way means that not only you're getting an integrated solution, but it makes life easier for your procurement company. You can buy it all with a single purchase approval, with single processing, and so your procurement office will love you for that simplification. AppDynamics monitors the performance and gives you the deep code insights. Harness is the CD platform in this example, automating the deployment process and the rollbacks, and Apica manages that continuous testing for specific transactions and for load testing and synthetics. Now these integrations from this particular story focus on continuous delivery, but we are integrated at AppDynamics with many more products as well. We normally display our partners in this visualization because we're building an ecosystem around AppDynamics. On the input side here, you're seeing the products you needed to enhance our visibility across the full environment. So Vertana, giving us great insight into storage networks, for example, giving us the insight, the visibility that we need for that. Then on the action side, well, we take the actions that you require in the tools that you choose. You know, nobody is going to have one product that does everything here. So meanwhile, we can focus on correlating all of this in the middle between code and infrastructure and business needs, feeding it all into our cognition engine to deliver AI, artificial intelligent AI ops, function for the entire software development lifecycle and for your production environment. In fact, skilling up in performance is not just good for your enterprise, but it's also a good career move. Our hosts here today, DevOps Institute, showed that experience with monitoring is and performance tuning is already considered a must-have by 39% of hiring enterprises. You won't get in the door without it. So, all right, let's bring this puppy home. I went through 5 lessons in this session, talking about CD implementation. Start with APM first. It supports every step along the journey. You cannot be continuous and be manual, so automate deploys, verifies, and rollbacks. Release schedules are a balance, remember, so not just an engineering choice, not just a business choice. You have to talk to each other. It's a joint choice. Also look for integration. No product that does everything, so custom building integration goes against the basic principles of DevOps and CD because you're spending your time focusing on code that the customer won't experience. You should be focused on code that your customer will experience. So sometimes, and despite everything, sometimes you're going to have to debug live, whether it's in the QA environment or the test environment or in production. So get yourself a tool that empowers you to do that quickly so that you can move on again to focus on the code that the customer will experience. So remember Cameron's question from the title of the presentation, will it never end? The answer is no, it will never end. That's what continuous means. Automate and integrate to accelerate your CD pipeline creation. So we went through a lot today. Here's some further reading for you on continuous delivery and our central nervous system, the integrations, and a few other ideas of deploying AI ops and things like that. I'll be in the Skill Up chat room in a few minutes to take questions if you're watching this live. So I'll post these links in there for you. One challenge with online events, though, is that the chat room's closed with the event. So I've put at the top here a link. I'd also encourage you to copy that top link. This is to a WebEx room for this specific session. And I will keep that room open for the next month or more as people are active in it. You will need to put in an email address, sorry, but that's the way it works. Whether you are watching this live or after the fact, you can go into there and ask questions and make comments about the session. Now also at the bottom here, I've added in my chosen charity. Look, Doctors Without Borders, or Médecins Sans Frontières. I have traveled to 35 countries in my life. I've been lucky. And I have seen how different medical access can be. I even have in my extended family some doctors who have been airdropped into some of these situations. Look, Medicines with Doctors Without Borders has minimal overhead. They're a strong charity, and they make a difference. The money you spend goes to where it needs to go, not to sort of management. If you can spare a few dollars in these times, then please consider donating some money to that charity. They are helping people all around the world in the current crisis. So that's it. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank DevOps Institute for running this session and giving me this opportunity to talk to you all. If you're in the on-demand session, jump into the network chat room and chat lounge, and I will jump in there in a minute or so and be in there to take questions from you and interact with you, kind of thing. And as I say in that link on the prior screen, also that WebEx thing will last. If you're watching this on demand after the fact, you can get into that WebEx room after the fact and ask me questions through there as well. But mainly, I want to say thank you for your time and wish you a happy day for the rest of the day, and please stay safe.